attorney, and I will be talking about manipulation of the Greeks within Black-Scholes today for my presentation. Here's a little overview of what I'll be talking about today. I'll be talking about some vital trading information that I think is crucial to understanding the basics of what I'm talking about, and then further on into the depths of what we'll be getting into. Then we'll move on to an explanation of options, because that's what this is in reality focusing on. Some key terminology just to further help the understanding, defining Black-Scholes and the Greeks, applying the formula of the Black-Scholes, and then our conclusion of how each Greek is affected. So some of the vital trading information. You might ask, what's a derivative? Well, in mathematics, we know a derivative to define an instantaneous rate of change. Well, it's kind of different in financial terms. A derivative is essentially a contract. It's a contract that is a measure of a value of an asset, maybe an index or a commodity. Basically, it's a bet that a buyer places on the asset to increase or decrease the value. That's what they're betting on. But the tricky part is knowing which will happen and when. So there are tools and mathematical equations to help us decide which to bet on. The idea of this as a whole, the entire industry, is called financial engineering. You might also ask, what do you mean by buying and selling assets? When we say buying and selling assets, we are referring to buying and selling stock, particularly in our case, stock, because that's what we'll be focusing on. Like I said very previously, it could be an index or a commodity. Although it could be applied to those other financial instruments. There are several basics I'd like to cover to just be clear on how it all works. Stock prices are volatile entities, and they can have large impacts on corporations' success within any financial market. The higher the price, the higher the value of the stock or value of the company in terms of the share, and vice versa. Purchasing shares of stock often involves a small percentage called a brokerage fee, which is often why derivatives are used to avoid these fees through offsetting avenues, one of them being options. We'll be talking about futures and options mainly. You might ask, what's a future? An option falls under the category of a future. It does so because a future is basically something a buyer agrees to pay in the future at a set period of time. So you agree to pay for X amount of dollars for C commodity in 365 days, which is usually the base time that you would agree upon, would be 1 year. So moving on to options. Options are a risk mitigation tool, and they're a version of a forward, because essentially they are a forward, because it involves the agreeance from a buyer and seller paying for an asset for X amount of price in T amount of time, and then at the end of it, at maturity, they say, you can, depending on what type of the option, you can either buy or not buy, and you have the option to do so, but you also have to pay the fee that is associated at the beginning of the agreed upon time at the beginning. So there's that. You might also ask, what's a call and what's a put? A call is the option to buy given to the buyer. A put is the option given to the seller. Both those are at the time of maturity, T. You might ask, what's a long versus a short? A long call or put is basically you're betting on the asset's value to increase. And a short call or put is where you're betting on the assets to decrease, which you'd be profiting if the value of it decreases, because you're betting on that. So some more key terminology that we'll be using is the strike price, which is the price the buyer pays for the asset. Spot price, the price at which the asset is currently listed in the market. The option premium price, the price paid by the buyer to the seller for the option contract, or basically just a premium. The expiration or time to maturity, which is the time at which the option must be decided on to buy or not. So yeah, like previously said. So what is Black-Scholes? It's basically a formula that was created in 1973. It was created by two men named Fisher Black and Myron Scholes. They were both in financial industries and decided that they wanted to use their mathematical skills to create a formula to predict the future outcome of options. Originally, it was done so to to predict options in the European market, although it can be applied to the American markets as well, which we will be doing. I will be showing you. Listed below here at the bottom is the basic formula of what we use. As you can see, D1 and D2, they're very large inputs into this equation. We'll be getting into the depths of those as well. Like I said, here's D1 and D2. D1 and D2, they both involve the Greeks, and as you can see, T, time to maturity. It's a pretty in-depth equation, but as soon as you solve D1 and D2, the rest is simple inputs. So you might ask, what are the Greeks? Here are their functionalities. There's delta, gamma, theta, vega, and rho. There's 5 Greeks. We'll be manipulating these, so we'll be taking the base of a stock option, like the actual inputs, and then manipulating those to manipulate the Greeks. You can't manipulate the Greeks directly, you must manipulate the inputs, but we'll be doing so in terms of the Greeks to determine its effect on the overall outcome of the price. So applying the formula, like I said, we'll be actually analyzing these 3 companies. It'll be Ford, Microsoft, and Boeing. It's also important to note that all these calculations were done pre-COVID-19, and the formula does not factor in pandemics, sadly, strictly mathematical. As we can see here, in our call option, we have actually lowered delta by adjusting the inputs to the equation, and that has actually turned a profit from negative $30 to, at the bottom here, this is time to maturity of $19.66. And again, as you can see with the blue graph here, it increases in terms of the small stock price pretty significantly. So it turns a profit when we lowered our delta value. So moving on to Microsoft, we have again our inputs here, our Greek values here, which are an output of our inputs. So as we can see from the chart, it turns a very small profit. Again, looking at the blue payoff line, and the bottom chart here again shows $22.40 from our initial inputs. Those are our real inputs that we have used. So it's a very small profit. So again, we went down here and we tried to manipulate delta and rho specifically. We actually increased them pretty significantly. And we went from a very, very small profit of about $19 down to negative $989. So we're actually hypothesizing that delta and rho have a large impact on the profit values. The higher the delta and rho values, the lower the profit. In fact, may even be net loss. And we'll look further into that as we move on to Boeing. So here's our Boeing initial values. Again, as you can see, their delta and rho values here are relatively small, and we have a pretty significant profit. Boeing is usually traded at a higher price though, so $423 of profit is not significant, especially in comparison to the underlying price of about $335. So that's kind of a lot, especially in terms of stock price in comparison to Ford and Microsoft. So we'll be adjusting their Greeks as well in this slide. So we did the actual opposite of what we did in Microsoft. We have significantly lowered our delta and rho values, and we saw a significant rise in price, or excuse me, in payoff. As you can see at this time of maturity down here, it's up to $1,577.52. Again, by the blue line here, it's pretty linear, especially in terms of our payoff, in terms of the value of the stock. So that's pretty interesting. And this brings us to our conclusion that we were able to analyze companies' stock prices and the derivatives within the market, and we were able to obtain optimal results while using all of our long call options. Definitely these methods can be distributed across short calls, long puts, and short puts as well, and even other types of options. There are even applications to commodities and indexes, like said previously. And we have successfully shown that there's a massive impact from delta and rho and the profitability of the option, particularly in our long call study that we've conducted. So I would definitely suggest purchasing Boeing based off of this information to maximize profits, purchasing a long call. And we have certainly concluded that delta and rho play a massive role in determining our profits. When searching for, if you were just to look at the Greeks, you should search for the lowest delta and the lowest rho for the highest profitability. I think that's all for my presentation. I thank you for your time. Have a great day.